There have been a number of accounts throughout history of people discovering portals to another reality or dimension. How they got there or here remains to be answered, and some of these people documented their experiences and shared them with the world so that others can know the truth, that there's more out there than we think, and to learn that existence could be way more complicated than we could ever know. But before we get into it, I'd like to say a big thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this episode. Our internet reliance has been rapidly increasing. From streaming our favorite shows to keeping in touch with our loved ones, even our banking is mostly done online these days. We want to think our information is safe, but as our online footprint continually increases, so does our need for proper security. Surfshark is a VPN service that protects you by encrypting all of your data that you send through the internet, keeping anyone unwanted from seeing it. Another great reason to use a VPN is that some content on specific streaming services can be restricted based on the country that you're in. With Surfshark, you can solve that problem by simply changing your location. Not only is this good for people who want to keep up with their favorite shows, but it can also be a critical tool for those who live in countries that heavily censor and monitor their citizens. So if you want both protection and freedom online, click the link in the description and use code Santoro. It not only gives you a whopping 83% off the regular price, but it also gives you 3 months of service totally for free. Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk for trying it out for yourself. And now, let's begin. Here are 5 mysterious cases of interdimensional travel. Number 5 is the MARCAHUASI Stone Forest. Outside of Lima, Peru, in the Andes Mountains is a plateau that many visitors frequent called the MARCAHUASI Stone Forest. The area is known for its pre-Incan ruins and strange rock formations that people say resemble people or animals. The formations were created by wind erosion over time and are thought to be around 10,000 years old. The formations are still not fully understood, and despite being studied, their meaning remains a mystery. In addition, many archaeological remains in ancient ruins were excavated by Peruvian archaeologist Julio C. Tello in the early 20th century that are also still a mystery. In these ruins, Tello discovered a number of mummies that are now on display in the Museo Larco in Peru. It was these discoveries that led many to do their own investigating, as it was clear the area was of mystic origin. One such investigation led to the discovery of what is believed to be a portal to another dimension in time. An account from a medical physician named Dr. Raul Rios Centeno details the story of a female patient who came to see him one day. The patient had entered into the stone forest and was left half paralyzed. Dr. Centeno performed several medical examinations and was confused to find that there were no traumatic injuries or anything else that would have attributed to her paralysis. The patient claimed that they were camping in the area with friends and entered the stone forest late at night. After exploring the area for a bit, the patient could hear strange music playing and was led to a small torchlit cabin. She looked through the window of the cabin and discovered people dancing inside that were dressed unusually. As she explained in her account, I felt a sudden sensation of cold, which I paid little attention to, and I stuck my head through an open door. It was then that I saw the occupants were clad in 17th century fashion. As she started to enter the cabin to join the party, one of her friends pulled her out in an instant, but the half of her body that entered the cabin was the half that was left paralyzed. Dr. Centeno's only explanation after examining her was the partial entry of this person into an anomalous zone was able to produce a change in the energy flow existing in her nervous system. This experience is called a time slip, the distortion of time that causes a physical injury when one person enters another time period through our own. That woman never recovered and maintains her story to this day. Number 4 is the Green Children of WOOLPIT. During the 12th century, 2 children appeared out of nowhere in the village of WOOLPIT in Suffolk, England. The brother and sister were quite unusual, They had strange green complexions, spoke an unknown language, and can only eat beans. They eventually began to eat other food and even lost their green complexion, but the boy became sick and ultimately died. But the girl was integrated into society. She was baptized and eventually learned English. Over time, she was eventually able to explain that she and her brother came from a place called St. Martin's Land and that everything there was green. She claimed to be from a land of darkness, where the sun barely shone and where it was always dusk. Her account was that she and her brother were herding cattle one day when they heard a loud noise. They followed the cattle into a cave and suddenly showed up in our world after hearing strange bells. Several theories have been put forward to explain these children. The most popular explanation was by astronomer Duncan Lunan, who theorized in an article from the magazine Analog in 1996 that the children may have been from a planet in another universe. That somehow they transported from that universe to WOOLPIT from their home planet because of a matter transmitter malfunction. Now, some people believe that these children were simply malnourished and got lost from another part of our world, but many believe that they are evidence of interdimensional travel. Number 3 is the case of Gadianton Canyon. In May of 1972, 4 young women named Jenna North, Carol Abbott, Lisa Ratchford, and Bethany Gordon were driving back to Southern Utah University in Jenna's 1971 Chevrolet Nova. They had spent the day attending a popular rodeo near Pioche, Nevada, and took Highway 56 home. They became worried that they wouldn't get back to their campus in time, and that their headmaster would lock their hostel door, so they wanted to look for a way to get back quicker. At around 10 p.m., the girls approached a fork in the road and took a left at Gadianton Canyon, which looked inviting and may have been a shortcut. The black road that they were driving on suddenly became white, and Jenna had to slam on her brakes when the road ended at the face of a cliff. She turned the car around and simply thought that they had taken a wrong turn. However, when they got back onto the main road, the landscape had completely changed. What used to be barren and dry desert was now grain fields and ponderosa pine trees as they drove by the area utterly confused. They decided to stop at a tavern off of the road to ask for directions, but when they did stop, they noticed that the neon sign over the tavern displayed a message that the women were unable to understand. The letters on the sign were made up of twisted lines and unusual curves. When one of the women in the car popped her head out to ask one of the patrons for directions, she whipped her head back in and started to scream hysterically. Shortly after, 4 egg-shaped vehicles that were sitting on tricycle wheels with bright lights mounted on them were speeding straight towards the car. The women took off and raced back to the canyon where the white asphalt turned back into black road. They now found themselves back in the desert, driving on familiar road. Jenna accidentally drove the car into a creek and left the Nova with 3 flat tires. They waited until morning came to get out of the car and hike back onto Highway 56, where they saw a highway patrol cruiser and told the officer the entire ordeal. The investigation of the incident led to some interesting findings. There were no tire tracks showing that the Nova had even left Highway 56, and it was unexplainable how the car had traveled 2 miles north of the highway without leaving any physical evidence. The women firmly believed that they had entered into a time-space warp. Number 4 is Euplar Vorin of Luxaria. There are multiple American and European publications from the middle of the 19th century that all tell the same story from the district of Lebes near Frankfurt, Germany. Authorities in the area discovered an unknown man who appeared to be lost and was walking around the beach with a distressed and confused look on his face. Since the authorities deemed him suspicious, they decided to arrest him and take him to jail. While they were interrogating him in custody, the man claimed that his name was Euplar Vorin and that he was from a country called Luxaria, which was located up north on a continent called Sacria. He said that Luxaria was hundreds of miles away from Europe and across the enormous oceans. His home continent of Sacria was allegedly one of 4 other continents: Aflar, Astar, Auslar, and Euplar. When he was sailing the oceans in search of his lost brother, Euplar's ship wrecked and he washed up onto the shore in our world. He then said that his brother was apparently a great explorer who was looking for the New World, which Euplar described by pointing to Europe on a nearby map. When he was asked to point to Sakria on the map, Euplar said that it was missing and Greenland was in place of the much larger continent. After further questioning, the authorities found that Euplar was speaking a very old and rough German language, but was able to write in what he called Luxarian. The religion he studied was called Ispadian, which he compared to the teachings of Christianity. After he was looked at by scholars who concluded that his story could be real, Euplar was sent to Berlin to be studied further. However, when he was en route to Berlin, Euplar became hysterical and jumped out of the carriage and disappeared into the woods. He was never seen again. To this day, many question who this man was and where he truly came from, and if his account is evidence of another world that exists outside of our own. And number 1 is the man from TAURED. Perhaps the most well-known story of interdimensional travel is the story of the man from TAURED. On a hot day in July of 1954, a nicely dressed Caucasian man with a beard arrived at the Tokyo International Airport. He spoke French but also knew Japanese as well as other languages as well. When he stopped at customs, the man said that he was from a country called TAURED. The immigration officers did not believe the man and asked for his passport, in which the man complied. Sure enough, the country that was issued on the man's passport was TAURED. The confused officers took the man into questioning and asked him where this supposed country was. According to the man, the country was located between France and Spain and had been there for 1,000 years. When he was asked to point to it on a map, the man was stunned to find that Andorra was where TAURED should have been. The officers and him argued for a while about the validity of his claims and decided to hold the man in a nearby hotel for the night, thinking that he might be a criminal. They held him in the room while they continued their investigation and even put 2 guards in front of the man's door. However, when the officers went in the room the next morning, the man had vanished into thin air, as well as all of his documents. Many believe that he was one of a number of people who passed through a parallel dimension by accident and found themselves in our world. Thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Remember to visit the link in the description and join my Discord while you're there, and I'll see you next time.